So welcome back to our podcast. Today we're going to be talking about another controversial topic, which is talking to teenagers and young adults about finances. So let's start off, and we're going to jump right in, balancing their first part-time job with going to school. What are your thoughts about that one?
So I think the key is obviously the younger you can talk to kids about money, the better.
Right.
A lot of kids are getting their first part-time job, 15, 16 years old-ish. And I just met the client a couple weeks ago. She said her granddaughter's at Tim Hortons. She can't pour coffee yet because she's not 16, but she's 15 and she can clear off tables and do a bunch of other things.
I was not aware about that. You cannot serve coffee until you're 16.
I didn't know that either. So, so the key is having a discussion with them about once they get their first couple of paychecks, what does that look like? I think that you should let kids take their first paycheck or two, spend the money, and have a discussion. We did this with my stepson. He got a job and he wanted these headphones. And he blew his whole first paycheck. And I said, okay, like, how did you feel about that? And he says, wow, like, I figured out how many hours I had to work for those headphones. So, if you let kids buy into consumerism and they can feel, okay, how many like pleasant or maybe not so pleasant customers did you have to work with and interact with?
Right.
How many hours did you work? And I think the one thing that it is hard to convey when they just have a very part-time job, if they're under 18, they're not having EI and they're not having CPP come off their check, maybe a small amount of tax. But for the most part, if a kid's just working a very part-time job at Tim Hortons or McDonald's, there's not really any tax coming off. So it's like, great, you get to keep all of this money. But as you get older, informing them that you don't necessarily get to keep all of that money. And then once you have that paycheck, what do you do with it? How much can you spend on miscellaneous items? Keep in mind, for these 15 and 16-year-old kids, I mean, mom and dad are still probably buying their clothes. They might be starting to want to, buy some clothes on their own. They might want to be starting to, pay for, going to the movies or meals and that sort of things with their friends. But then you can talk to them about having a basic budget, about, spending so much per week if they maybe want to treat themselves to lunch at school, or maybe it's going to the movies with their friends, but then also taking some of that money and putting into savings. So when I was 15, when I was 13, I was babysitting. So I babysat, I walked a kid to school. And then when I was 15, I umpired baseball. I did corn detasseling, which was awful. But my first real part-time job was I worked at Zellers at Devonshire Mall. Got that job when I was 16.
Yep.
And I was making some pretty decent money. But my parents, and we've talked about money all our lives, my parents had their own financial advisor. So their financial advisor set me up with my own investment account. So I was 16 years old and I didn't have a choice. So, it was like I was read the Riot Act, and obviously it worked. I'm still a very diligent saver. So I didn't have a choice. But you know what? I will give my parents' advisor. Funny, I actually ran into him. He's actually still working, but he's still an advisor. And but he treated me like I was a grown up, and he gave me respect. And hey, you're working and you're saving, and he helped to educate me. So kudos to him because he did a fantastic job. And I was 16 and I started putting money away. And I had a discussion with my dad about a vehicle and wanting to save. So I paid for my own driver's ed. And then I bought my first car when I was 17. My parents helped me. My grandfather passed away, and I've shared the story on other podcasts, but he left me $5,000. So that helped. And then my stepdad put the rest of the vehicle on the line of credit, and then I had to pay him back. Keep in mind, I bought about a 1995 Chrysler Dodge Neon. That was my first car. It was a demo, so it had a few kilometers on it. It was like 13,000 and change. So I had the 5,000 that my grandfather gave me. I had some money in savings, and then I would work at Zellers, and my stepdad would say, "Okay, now give me." He knew what I worked and I made, and I give him money. He's like, "No, give me more." So within 5 months, I had paid back his line of credit. So I appreciate that he helped me. But I had to pay for my own gas in my car, and I had to pay for my own car insurance. I'm fortunate that I was a young lady that I didn't have a horrendous car insurance bill. If you're watching this and you think, okay, well, it's a little bit different because I have a son, and car insurance for boys can be. Actually, I just talked to my girlfriend the other day. Her son is looking at getting a car. It's $4,000 a year. Okay, mine was not that expensive. Yeah. So I guess I had that advantage. But if I wanted to go out and do things, I mean, we had the graduated license. I was like one of the first ones to start with the graduated licensing. So I couldn't drive on my own for the first 8 months anyway. So I didn't actually get my car until I was 17. But it was my responsibility to take care of it. And so my parents gave me that responsibility at a young age. You know, I mean, that was, oh my God, we're going on almost 30 years ago now. But you know, it was a good learning lesson for me, for sure. So I think that's a conversation you can have with kids for a part-time job is, you know, are you going to want to have some independence and be able to drive a vehicle at some point? Great. You need to help start saving for it, and you need to think about insurance. Had a discussion not too long ago with one of my stepkids that wanted a Tesla. I said, awesome. Teslas are really cool cars. How about you look at how much insurance is going to be for you? Did you know that for a young man in their mid-20s that the car insurance on a Tesla is actually more than a car payment on a Tesla?
Wow.
So he very quickly changed his mind in terms of vehicle and picked something else. But I think that's something that, you know, you can start having discussions with kids, even at 15 or 16. You're looking at wanting to drive. Driver's ed now. I think for my stepdaughter it was almost $800. So it's definitely gone up.
Driver's ed.
For driver's ed, yes.
Yeah,
I mean, it's helpful for your insurance.
Yeah.
I think mine was like 400 and change. But those are things that they can start researching. I mean, we have the internet back then to look up how much things were. So kids can, you know, check that on their devices. Then, you know, if kids have cell phones, at what point are you going to relinquish the responsibility of them paying for a cell phone on their own, right? These are all conversations that you can have at dinner. Hopefully when your devices are not at your table, you put your devices somewhere else and have the conversation about, you know, are they going to purchase a new vehicle? You know, are they buying something used, or do you have a vehicle already in your household that they can use, but maybe they're helping to contribute towards gas and insurance and maintenance and repairs. So I think those are all very basic conversations that you can have with a kid that's 15 years of age or older.
I think it's important to establish that thing. Again, we talked in a previous podcast talking to young kids about like introducing them to the concepts of money and spending and all that fun stuff. And as they get older, teenagers especially, I mean, there's a note here that you talk about like the more money you save, the more options you have. And I think that is so relevant. I was just talking to my wife last night. I moved out of my house when I was 22, right? And like absolutely no financial support. I was working like 3 jobs at the time. You know, I had to pay my rent, my groceries, my car insurance, my gas. And I'll tell you, I was scared. Like it's the fear of the unknown, right? Oh my God, how's this all going to turn out? But I never in my entire life felt so much freedom that win or lose, you know, fail or succeed, it was all on me. And that really, to me anyway, it was a very real character builder. So I'm like, I'm going to make this and I'm going to make it work. And
yeah,
I don't care,
that's good.
You know, so.
But the reason I say that is, you know, and it doesn't matter what age, you know, you could be, you know, 15 or 16. Like I equate having a vehicle, being able to get into a car and just drive. I equate that with huge independence.
Yeah.
You know, think about, you know, if you're watching this and you have, you know, parents or grandparents that are in their 80s and they're at the risk of losing their license, they're trying to do everything to keep their license because that just gives you the ability to just get in the car and go and do what you want to do. So talking to kids about saving money so that you're not waiting for someone else to get home to use their vehicle or coordinating with mom or dad's schedule, right? And as they get older, you know, you could be in a job that you hate. So if you're in a job that you really don't like, but you don't have any money saved, you're kind of stuck. Or I've had situations where I've met with people that they're in relationships that they don't want to be in, but financially they can't get out.
Right.
So that's why we aim to educate people so much is the more money you have saved, the more options you have. So if you hate your job, I'm not saying just, you know, turn around and quit your job, but you know, if you've got that 3 or 6 months of total household income set aside and you're in a job where it's not great for you, and you have the ability to leave the job while you concentrate full time on finding a new one. So I think teaching kids about having independence and having, I'm not, saying, get them to save money so when they're 15, 16, they're moving out of your house. But I think the more that you can have money saved, just the more options you have available to yourself in life.
I think any way you go about it, any conversation that a parent can have with kids about money is great. I think, and I think they just introduced the concept of financial literacy in schools. I think I read something about that, so I think they're starting to teach basic financial literacy in schools.
Yeah, my stepdaughter took a course. She's in grade 12, and she was taking something, I don't know if it was civics. I'm not exactly sure of the name of the class. But they had a budget, and they had to like do a grocery shopping list, and there were some other items that they had to do to get an idea of what things cost, which, I'm not knocking the school system, but by like the time a kid's in grade 12, I think you should already have a pretty general idea of what an average family grocery shopping trip should be, because in our last podcast, we talk about how like Glenn and I bring our young children to the grocery store so they can learn. Right. I mean, it's good that they're doing that. So I'm not exactly sure of the different concepts that they're teaching and learning. Hopefully they're learning about the cost of rent and a mortgage and amortization and different terms.
I hope so too. I don't know exactly what the curriculum entails, but I think I remember reading something about that, how about financial literacy will now be taught in certain high school classes. And the reason why I think that's beneficial is we're very fortunate to be able to take our kids to the grocery store. I mean, like, I know single mothers or different situations with people where they don't have the time. Mm-hmm. Some of them are working 2 jobs just to stay afloat. And I think, learning from the parents is the best thing. Mm-hmm. But sometimes if that's not available, then school would be the best way to learn.
True.
To be introduced into some of those concepts.
On the flip side, some places you still get mailed actual flyers, or you can go on your phone. You can still sit down, I think, with your kids and say, okay, you know what? Mom's got $100 this week or $200 this week. What are we going to do to meal plan, and what kind of groceries are we going to have? Yeah. So I still think that time's going to pass anyway. I honestly, and I've learned this, one of the benefits of me having my son later in life is I've learned it doesn't take a whole lot more from being a good parent to a great parent. So, your kids get home from school and, you have from like, say, 3:30 until 8:30 when they go to bed, you have 5 hours of concentrated time with them, but you can have conversations with them. So if it's, you're going to do grocery shopping while they're at school, well, you can still have a conversation with them about, what kind of meals do you want? This is how much I have to spend. They can help you. So even if they're not physically in the grocery store, you can say, okay, you have $20 to allocate towards your snacks. What would you like? Okay, then as the mom, if I'm at the grocery store without my kid, okay, I'm going to buy you bananas and you want, some granola bars and whatever the other snacks are. I think you can still have those conversations.
Yeah. I think it's just important to always have conversations with your kids, especially when it comes to money, and not have it be such a taboo thing. Like I said, like I didn't know what investing was until I was in my early 20s.
But even like there's so many teachable moments. Like I don't know how many times now I go into a restaurant and you got a family of 4 and they're on their phones. I'm like, you know what? Go home and open a can of soup. Like nothing frustrates me more because everything is so expensive. You go to a restaurant now, you want a burger and fries. You're like $20 easily for a burger and fries for fun. You know what? Put your phone away. Put your phone away and have a discussion. Look at the menu. Talk about the cost of things. You can have a basic conversation with your family. And, if you want to be on your phones, then just go home. To me, it's just mind-boggling. I don't understand how you're going to go out for a meal. I remember my husband and I, we had some gift cards. We went to the Keg, and there was this family across from us. I'm thinking, okay, I know how much our dinner was. We like to each get an appetizer. And if I'm going for a steak, I'm going to get a nice steak and I'm going to get a drink. And it was $150. I'm sure that family, their kids were, tweens / early teenagers. Right. And your family probably spent almost $200 on dinner and you didn't even look at each other. It was just bizarre.
Family dynamics. Yeah. They're different for everybody.
True. Yeah. But you know what? I think if you can just sit and have those conversations, there's so many teachable moments, with your family. So.
Okay. So how do you go about teaching 15-year-olds to early 20-year-olds about credit cards?
15 to 18 is kind of hard because you're not old enough to get a credit card. But when a child turns 18 and they then become an adult and they can get a credit card, then you can talk about co-signing with them, and maybe they have a $300 or a $500 limit, and that's for emergencies. If they have a vehicle and something happens and, you don't have CAA or they need to be towed or something, then I think it's okay for them to have a credit card. And talking about, then you put a tank of gas on there. So let's say you have an 18-year-old, to put a tank of gas and it's $80. Well, then you pay off the $80 and have a discussion and show them that, let's say you rack up $1,000 credit card bill and you don't pay it off and you just make the minimum payment. There's all kinds of cool tools and calculators. It'll take you 18 years to pay that off. So I'll tell people all the time, you can go out for a nice dinner, and hey, you go out for a nice dinner and let's say you charge $100. If you can't pay it off that month, and you just keep making minimum payments, that better be a really darn good dinner.
Right. Because
you're paying it off for say the next 18 years. Right. So again, I think it's simple conversations and talking to them about being responsible. If you have kids that are 18 plus years old, there are free apps like Borrowell, Credit Karma. There's tons of different apps out there. Some of them, they'll coordinate with your bank account, checking in and knowing what your credit score is. There's nothing, I think it's a great idea, great habit to get into. You also need to lead by example. If you're a parent where you have like 10 different credit card statements coming in and your kids can see your mail, well, you also need to, I don't know if that's on the list or if that's on the one for the next kids, but it's like if they're with you and it's one thing if, you charge everything when you pay for groceries, but then you pay off your bill. How many parents are charging and they don't have the affordability to pay them off? So it's kind of hard to lecture your kids about credit and being responsible with money when you maybe have some of your own work to do too.
God, a lot to consider and a lot to think about. And it's going to be an interesting time because my kids are entering that. Like my oldest will be 12 in October, and then then on to the teenage years.
But she's got a little part-time job now.
Yes, which is really nice.
Yeah. So Glenn's daughter's delivering my new book that I wrote. So his daughters have a little part-time job, but this is primo opportunity to have some discussion about, okay, how many hours did we work? How many houses did you have to walk up to and put the book into the mailbox? And this is how much you made.
They're so excited to get paid.
Yeah. I'll talk about that after. I tell you what you owe them, whether you want me to email e-transfer you or if you want to give them like cold hard cash.
Yeah.
But then what are they doing with that money?
Yeah,
right?
That's the whole thing.
Because the weather's nice now. What if they're doing this in July and August and it's hot?
Yeah.
I think that'll be good. We'll have to keep them busy all summer.
We already talked about it because we're big ice cream people. Yeah. And I said, well, when you get paid, we can go for ice cream and you can buy mommy and daddy an ice cream cone this time.
But you know what?
I won't let them pay for it. But
but that's nice though, because then they can get the feeling of giving something.
Yeah.
Right? But then it's also a great way to have a discussion about now how much are you going to save, right? So how much do you save from, it's having a discussion about needs and wants, and there's nothing that they really need, right?
No.
You pay for their clothes, you pay for their food.
Yeah. And
but
their
there's some
shelter.
items that they want, but over time, now's a good time to talk to them over time. Okay, you're 12, you're going to be 12, so you have obviously some time before you can have that, part-time job that you're going to get a regular paycheck. But what will that look like in the future? It's okay to plan for them and teach them independence early on.
I think it's interesting, like, it's a couple years ago, my daughter used to play this online game all the time, and she asked if she could buy this avatar thing or whatever, right? For like $5. I said, okay, that's fine. We'll get it. It's like $5. So it upgraded her hawk or eagle or whatever it is in the game that she was playing. And then she doesn't play the game anymore, right? So I had the conversation with her. I said, okay, so you took that $5 and you bought something. It kind of brought you some joy for like maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then you just don't play with it anymore, right? So it was kind of like trying to get her to think about what you spend your money on, right? Because there's all these downloads that they can get for like video games that they're playing in that. And I said, are you going to continue to use the game? Like, is it going to get you further? Like, because my one daughter is eyeing this other video game that she wants to get, but I think it's one of those passing fancies. I'm like, I think after 2 months, you're not going to play it anymore. So do you want... And video games are not cheap.
But we do that as adults. We have impulse buys all the time. How many people are watching this? You got a treadmill, you have some piece of exercise equipment that you're never going to use.
But the one she wants to buy is like $80. It's like an $80 game. Right. And I'm just like, okay, you're going to be getting paid soon because like we just started this job. It's like, do you want to spend it on it? I'm not going to say no. It's your money you know, to do what you want because you worked, you earned it. But like you got to really kind of consider it. But like she's only 9, right? So
that is a really good teachable moment, though, right?
It's like,
where it's like, hey, you have X amount of dollars. Is that what you want to spend? If we pay her $20 an hour to go deliver books, you're gonna do that for 4 hours. Is that worth it?
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, it's just interesting. So I'm just trying to get them to see what are you spending your money on, and is it worth it? Because then hopefully they avoid that, what you were just talking about when they're adults. See something, you get exercise gear, and it just kind of sits there, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we're all just trying to do the best we can with our kids,
For
right?
sure, 1,000%. Yeah. And that's why I like, you get to talk to different people about what they do and you learn different ideas, right? I tried we talked in the last one about budgeting with my 7-year-old and an allowance. And one of my girlfriends said, here, I'm going to share with you. She's a teacher. She has this beautiful checklist for her son. So we came up with one together to track what he's doing. And so I think the key is the more that you can share and have open dialogue. I talk to my friends. We talk. If you're related to me or you're a friend of mine, we talk about money all the time. It's just, I don't know, it's just a go-to conversation.
Great. Yeah, I think that's great.
But then you can learn more, as time goes.
Right.
And, you're never going to be the perfect parent, but the more knowledge that you can arm yourself with or take, pick and choose ideas from other people, why not?
I think that's one of the best lessons I've had, like, is hanging out with you, is having conversations about money. Like, my friends and I, it was never something we ever talked about. And I remember a couple of years ago, you and I did this whole thing about estate planning and like the pros and cons and like how it can be really detrimental to a family's health if you don't have an estate plan. Mm-hmm. And I have a yearly day out with the boys. Like, we'll just get together, have dinner, do something fun or whatever. And we sat around talking, and my one buddy who has 2 kids, like, didn't have a will, and so like all of us just kind of ganged up and I said, you know what, you have kids now, you got to start really thinking about this estate planning and that. And it was just really funny because like 2 days after we had all gone out, he sent me an email saying, okay boys, I went and signed up with a lawyer, got a will done.
Good,
and
yes.
But, like, it's important to have these conversations even with your friends if it's uncomfortable or whatever, but it's just important. Now if anything happens to him, like, his kids actually will be taken care of, and everything's kind of set in motion, right? So
yes. Well, women talk about like finances a lot more.
Yeah.
I don't think that men,
I don't know. It's just weird. Like,
I'd be curious. Okay. Well, maybe in the comments, we love to know if you're, a man or a woman. Do you talk to your friends regularly about finances?
Do you talk to your friends about finances? Because it's so strange. One of the really cool stories that I like to tell us is one of my really good friends was he wanted to go to school at the University of Ottawa. And his parents were like, that's great. That's fine and dandy. We can't afford to do that. So you're going to have to figure out how you can do that on your own. So he went and joined the military.
Oh.
Went and joined the military, and did a couple years, and the military paid for a percentage of his university, his education. And to me, that's always gained so much of my respect. It's one of those, well, my parents are not going to do it. And he didn't look at it as an obstacle, but he looked at it as a challenge. Okay, so how can I do this? Fantastic. So he looked into different ways that he could do it, and he found the best route for it. And he, the military experience that he had was a great experience for him, and he loved it. And
he served our country too.
Yeah, served the country, and did some things which was really, really fantastic. Learned a lot and got a chance to travel a little bit. And then now he's been a gym teacher for like almost 25 years, and he's on the verge of retiring in the next 5-6 years. But his whole career hinged on whether he could go to school or not, and he just went, I'm gonna figure this out. And I got a ton of respect for him. He's one of my really good friends, and I tell him that all the time. I said, when you did that, it really showed me about how perseverance, making choices, and looking on how you can do things instead of just going, oh well, my parents ain't gonna pay for it, so what was me, and play the victim thing, right? Cool. So anyway, I just want to share that story. And if you have any stories that you'd like to share with us, please share them.
Yeah, absolutely. I always want to learn new things. Yeah.
So, all right. Any closing thoughts? I know we got to wrap this one up.
Well, I think the key is just the sooner you can have these conversations with your kids about money and be open. My husband and I talk about bills and things in front of our 7-year-old all the time. And as your kids get older, having conversations, them knowing that, property taxes are due, that you have regular open communication. I mean, if you fight with your significant other, you might want to save most of those for when your kids aren't in earshot. But if you're going to have those grown up civil discussions together, I think it's okay. Personally, I think it's okay if your kids know, they have a general idea of, okay, how much money do mom and dad have? And this is how much our, mortgage and our bills are. Money doesn't grow on trees. So if we're going to go on a family vacation, that we need to save. That, then maybe we can't have Friday night, dinners out or pizza. We're going to make some pizzas at home and save some money so that we can go on that family vacation. Or, mom or dad's going to need a new vehicle. We're going to have to cut a few corners so that everybody's on board. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I think also it's important to I don't want to say groom, but like prepare your kids for real life.
Absolutely.
And I think some parents that shelter their children because they don't want to talk about these kind of things in public. I mean, like personal belief, I think you're doing a disservice to your kids by not talking to them about money because they're going to be thrust in this world where they're not prepared, and then they're going to end up with credit card debt, not know how to finance a vehicle or like a mortgage, or and just take a real bad deal. Like I've heard horror stories of people signing off on mortgages, well, especially when all the housing rates went bonkers,
Yeah.
and now there's no way they're ever going to get back the money that they paid for the house that was just beyond their means.
Yeah.
So
And if like you don't know what you don't know, so bring somebody that you trust with you, right?
Yes.
I did a radio interview on the weekend. Like, I don't know a ton about cars. Like, I bought my first car. My stepdad helped me. The last vehicle I bought, I know I know it looks nice and I know what safety features I'm looking for. I brought my husband. Sometimes it's intimidating as a woman buying a car if it's a male salesperson. So if doing a mortgage or you're negotiating something, if that's not your forte and you don't have a financial advisor, then maybe you have a friend that's done a really good job at, managing their money. Bring them. I've had people come to see me for an initial meeting and they've brought along a girlfriend because, they're divorced or their significant others passed away, or they bring their kids. They want a second set of ears.
Right.
I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that either.
So education, I think that is the key to all this, and that is the reason why we're doing this. So we hope you got something out of it. If you have those teenagers or early kids, and the kids that are going into their early 20s, have those important conversations about money, like financing, mortgaging, getting loans for cars, and all that fun stuff, because we would rather have you help them prepare for it than have them learn by the real world and getting like thrust into these really bad deals where they're going to be paying for it for a very long time. So my name is Glenn Carl. This is Olin Godfrey, the financial architect for Canadians. We hope you've gotten some great information from us. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave them in the comment section below, and we'd like to try to address them as best we can. Have a great day.